I want to discuss with you 504 Unit 1 and 2. In Unit 1, I only ask you to present yourself. And I know some of you know each other because you've been in the cohort online as part of the online student cohort, and you've already taken classes together, but I don't know you, and I need to know, where you come from to help you better as you're taking the class. Unit 1 gives you a bit of respite with regard to assignment 1, which is due next week at the end of Unit 2. So I expect you to use this week to start working on assignment 1. However, I want to review with you very quickly in this video what the overall class is doing and how it goes on from Unit 2 on to Unit 11 and 12, right? That's what I want to do. So before I detail a little bit Unit 2 per se, I'm going to give you an overview of the different themes that we're discussing and what do I mean by understanding governments and governance in Canada, which is the name of this class. So in Unit 2, and I'll come back to this in a few minutes in this video, we're basically looking at the fundamentals, the big picture. We look at the federal government, its institutions, we look at the provincial governments, we look at territorial governance, and we look at local government, and we look at the big picture. In Unit 3, we look at challenges and reforms that have affected governments in Canada for the last 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the challenges. Some challenges, obviously, are a little bit like, melting snow. You never see the ground until suddenly it's all brown. Well, the snow can be very thick or very thin. And that's the issue here, is that some reforms have been very sudden. Other reforms have been, in a way, very slow coming, but they take forever to develop. And people are always discussing one government at a time. You have even new parliaments, and the same issues are still there, and they've still not resolved, right? So this is kind of what we're looking at. Unit 4, we look at a specific issue which has to do with downloading, uploading, decentralization, centralization, and forces that basically challenge the federal system of Canada. In other words, we start looking at how governments do what, whether it's federal or provincial, territorial, and how provinces and local governments such as cities and other local governments basically organize their work collectively together, and how the federal system from a fairly well-established traditional system of government has evolved to become what it is today. Sometimes both competitive and collaborative, but certainly a little bit more complex. We also look then in Unit 5 at service delivery. And this is also a specific topic in a way. Once we've looked at the big picture and we've looked at challenges and we've looked at, forces up and down across the different levels and tier levels of governments, we look at what citizens of Canada are most concerned about, the front lines, the service that actually impact them, or the services that they would like to have and don't have. And so service delivery and the transformation of service delivery is a very important part. Part of the service delivery is then discussed a little bit further in Unit 6, where we look at regulatory system. In other words, the rule-making capacity of governments when they act collectively, and how the different tier levels of governments, in a way, take responsibility for regulations, for partnering with the private sector, with non-profits, or acting on their own in the delivery of services. And the regulation and deregulation sometimes obviously plays a very important role in the perception of how those services are received, right? Because if you work with the private sector or non-profits, it is not so obvious. There is an issue of direct accountability and visibility as to who delivers the service. So Unit 4, 5, and 6 are really interesting because they look at transformation of processes, of who does what, at what level, in what capacity. Then we look at, again, some broader issues in Unit 7 with the issue of improving policy capacity. And here the big question is policy really complex and so complex that, it's very, very difficult to analyze it? And how are basically scholars of policy making analyzing this? We basically obviously look at stakeholders and the role of citizens and how elected officials and public officials, bureaucrats, interact with stakeholders and citizens. In Unit 8, we look at citizen engagement. Here then again, specializing a bit more in a certain direction of the course. In Unit 9, we look at financial matters, especially the budget and fiscal federalism, fiscal constraints on the activities of governments. And then in Unit 10, we come back to something that in a way allows us to wrap up all of these issues or specific issues together by looking at building accountability and performance. In other words, we take stock of what we've learned in the previous 3 units. And then in Unit 11, which is a little bit of a dry unit, we go back to issues of governance and administrative law, where we look at government responsibilities, under what context, and how basically the law, especially administrative public law, regulates and makes it in a way a responsibility of government to deliver certain services under very specific processes and conditions. So you see the course altogether really allows us to look at institutions, but also processes, and within institution and processes, we look at very specific aspects of the policy process. We look at different types of groups that are involved in the policy process, the responsibility of elected officials, responsibility of public officials, bureaucrats, citizens, debates around citizenship, citizenry, whether citizens are clients or customers, such issues, the role of stakeholders in the decision making, and so on and so forth. So in this sense, Unit 2 is just the introduction to the course. In Unit 2, what we really do, and this is why the assignment is so taxing for you, because you have to write 1,000 words, basically summarizing the situation in Canada today. You're basically looking at trying to summarize these fundamental mechanisms, institutions, and processes that characterize the Canadian system. And so, although I know it's hard for you to have to do some readings that I have selected for you in the unit, the Papillon article, for instance, but there are a couple of others, I want you to make the effort to write 1,000 words. And you have a discussion forum where you can ask some questions, and you'll see that is set up to help you think through. But the idea is for you to basically take stock of what you know and also realize what you can learn through the class. Looking at Canadian fundamentals, the principles and practices of government and governance in Canada. So with this video, I hope that I've introduced all of the course units, but also the work that I'm expecting for the first assignment. And I wish you a very good week, and I'll see you online. Thank you very much.